Please join me in reading the responsive reading, which is printed in your order of service. In the quietness of this place, surrounded by the all-pervading presence of the Holy, my heart whispers, keep fresh before me the moments of my high resolve, that in good times or in tempests, I may not forget that to which my life is committed.
Keep fresh before me the moments of my high resolve.
Good morning. I'm Sharon Collins. I've been a member of Fountain Street since 1982. I grew up as a Presbyterian, but as I became less of a believer, I found that Unitarian Universalism was the right place. For 10 years, we maintained a UU fellowship here in Greater Grand Rapids, but it never could grow. When David Rankin became the senior minister here, my husband and I joined. By the next year, I went to the character school as a fourth grade teacher. When Bruce Buddy became the education minister, I started as a supervisor of the third and fourth grades. This was when the character school filled all the classrooms every Sunday morning, every week. I stayed there until I moved from Heritage Hill to Spring Lake, and it was pretty far to come for the meetings and the preparation that needs to be done. And then I had to start being a grown-up again and learn how to come to the 11 o'clock service and sit here. But I could also start taking part in the adult education, in exploring beliefs and questions, a group that met for many Sundays, for many years of Sundays at 9:45 in the morning. It was the place for members and for newcomers to learn how liberal Fountain Street Church is. It was a group for social liberals and humanists who wanted to discuss how to live out their ideals, and the discussion could get very involved, but they stayed civil and supportive. And over the years, I moved from being a participant to being a leader of the group. I've been a district leader since the Beyond Sunday program started in 2003 by Jan Tolley and Pam Clark. At that time, we had 17 districts, so that they were made of neighborhoods as much as possible, to introduce members to each other and to create some social gatherings and some service gatherings during the rest of the week. And here I still am in the Blue District.
Okay, I'm Mary Jane Montgomery, and Sharon and I have both chosen today to focus on our volunteer activities rather than to focus on ourselves as much. And so we're sharing the things that we have been involved in. I've been a member of Fountain Street since 2002. I joined the choir almost immediately, where I found my original home. Shortly thereafter, I was given the job of being official photographer. I didn't keep that job for very long. A little bit of archiving too. And I became a social director for quite some time. I am a straight female, but I have transitioned in choir from soprano to tenor, so I'm actually a transsectional. During the ministry of Greg Stewart, I worked on the education committee as secretary, but living in Grand Haven, that only lasted for a few years. When the districts were formed, Sharon was active in the formulation, and when they consolidated the neighborhood districts into the color districts, I was invited to coordinate the Blue District and introduced to a fabulous co-leader, someone I'd never met before. She quickly became my best friend and our computer guru. We've worked together planning and implementing social and service activities for members of the Blue District that extends from Jenison to the vast lakeshore of Lake Michigan. After Sharon and I became comfortable with the planning and execution of the Blue District annual soup lunch, I became the choir's go-to person for meals, often that were, with Sharon's help, accomplished with good organization. We were less gourmet than our beloved Marie Penny, but we put on a number of meals. We did the 4 Fridays in February organ recitals, the lunches for that, the oratorio choir lunches, a choir dinner, and we have prepared 2 Thanksgiving meals that the church paid for, and we prepared for the Heartside Mission volunteers. We're always grateful for the many volunteers, including the district leaders who helped us with these projects. I also joined the gardening group because in the districts I met Louisa Nally, and so our lovely gardens are maintained throughout the year by her and her crew. It's not a big time commitment, but it's very fulfilling, and you feel like you've really done something good. We would like to join our district, we would like you to join our district this summer as we expand our rainbow activities. Those are the events that we hope members of any district can enjoy at our lakeshore locations. In July, we plan to have a dinner in Holland and attend the Hope Summer Repertory Theater performance of Hay Fever. We've reserved June and August dates for our always popular fish boil at Cherry Point Farms and Markets. That's in Shelby, and the flames from the fish boil might not reach the roof, but they get really high. You'd be hot if you were in the balcony by them. We hope you can join us for at least one of these events, and as you can see, we're dressed for the church picnic today. So, at Fountain Street, we believe that everyone deserves a life that's meaningful, a life that makes a difference. Both skeptics and believers belong at Fountain Street. Here, doubt and belief work together to free the mind, grow the soul, and change the world. This is Fountain Street Church. You belong here.
I was in the Cathedral of St. Andrew yesterday afternoon. They were observing their 140th anniversary as a building which was laid, obviously, 140 years ago when it was just a parish church. And the homily told something of the history of that building and of the community there. I was pleased to be there, and they read from the scripture, the Hebrew scriptures, an epistle, and then a gospel. Part of the epistle reading was the one that is called for in most Christian churches today. It's the one that's attributed to Paul as he is writing to the Christian community gathered in Rome. It's considered the most weighty of the Pauline epistles, the most lengthy document and doctrinal statement. Both Luther and Karl Barth thought this is the one with the most sinew in it. But I only have one verse for you just to kind of wet your whistle. For if you live according to the flesh, you will die. But if by the Spirit, you will live. For all who are led by the Spirit of God are children of God. Last week, I also told us that as a community, we need to be ready to be more present to the struggle for racial justice, especially around law enforcement. I don't know what the answer is yet. I think we have to discern that prayerfully and carefully and wisely. I've written some notes to some wiser people than me, hoping they can give me some advice. But I hope to make it my practice to lift up in this moment a name and a story of an unarmed person of color who perished at the hands of law enforcement in recent years. On December 2nd, 2014, Romain Brisbane, father of four, was shot to death in Phoenix, Arizona, when a police officer mistook his bottle of pills for a gun. He died on the scene. The only thing he had on his person was that bottle of pills. Romain Brisbane. My house is a mess. We are not eager housekeepers, to be honest, but it's been worse than usual this week because we had a painter in to do parts of the kitchen and other places, and that meant you have to take everything out of one room and put it in the other room, so everything looks a little bit like an attic in our house right now. I should add that our son, the one that lives in Michigan, is between apartments, and so he's leaving some of his stuff around our house now, so you are not welcome in my house. And we know this is not going to last. We also know it's not sustainable. Back in March, my wife and I, Wendy and I, began sorting through the stuff in the basement and other parts of the house, the stuff we've taken with us from one home to another over the years, stuff that was in our home in Brooklyn, our home in Austin, our homes in Massachusetts, all the way back to Chicago, and even stuff from our parents' homes, because when they died, they gave us the pleasure of taking care of their stuff. But even as we deaccession from our basement, every day more stuff comes in the front door. It seems that stuff is like dandelions. You can pluck it all day and it'll grow back in the middle of the night. Your laughter tells me this is not unique to me. I think the price of modern abundance is excess. I have way more shirts than I need. I have far too many neckties. I have more dishes and cups than any couple can possibly put to use. And even as a preacher, I have more books than I need, and so do you. We all know it, and yet we find it so hard to let go, don't we? We may not be hoarders like that program on TV, but we all have more stuff than we know we need, and probably more than we want, and yet it's so hard to let go of it. Last week I mentioned the difference between material and spiritual abundance, and that they seem to pull us in different directions, opposite directions. Let's be honest, the more stuff we have, that's the material abundance, the more our stuff has us. We have to store it and care for it. We become curators and janitors of our stuff. My house, the biggest piece of stuff I have, needs repair every year. The painting in the kitchen, the windows that need to be repaired, the finishing of the stairs that have been worn down, and something else after that. My car, which is already 12 to 13 years old, needs oil changes and lubrications, and God knows it needs tires and windshield wipers. The books and magazines I read and should read could make a stack as tall as I am, and no matter how much I read, it never gets shorter. On the other hand, and let's be honest, a life without stuff would be even harder. Every night, people with almost no stuff end up sleeping on our portico because they have no stuff, except what they carry: no home, no bed, no car, and all of them would happily trade their life of very little for my life of too much. There are rare creatures who choose a life of little stuff, monks mostly, who even then they still need food and clothing and shelter. You know, that's what monasteries do. It's a great deal. You come to the monastery and we will provide you with food and clothing and shelter, not much, but enough, in return for which you give up fame, fortune, and success. And that was a very appealing notion in centuries past, when food, clothing, and shelter were difficult to find in general, and fame and fortune were limited to a very few. For if you live according to the flesh, said Paul, you will die. For all who are led by the Spirit of God are children of God. Spirit and flesh are the old antagonists of Christianity, aren't they? Let's thank Paul for making that battle such a crucial one. When we think of monks and others who live with little bits of stuff and few creature comforts, we think they are fighting the battle of the flesh, suppressing their appetites and desires. And historically that was true, but the monastic call really is more than I don't want to want things. It's one every one of us has heard. The greatest need of our time, says the famous Trappist monk Thomas Merton, the greatest need of our time is to clean out the enormous mass of mental and emotional rubbish that clutters our minds. Our physical stuff is not the real problem, but merely the forensic evidence of the mental and emotional rubbish that clutters our minds. And if, as St. Irenaeus so beautifully said it hundreds of years ago, that the glory of God is man fully alive, we know in our heart of hearts that the fullness of life is inhibited by all the stuff. An encumbrance, like the chain drawn by Marley's ghost, one of our own making, link by link and yard by yard, girded on of our own free will. That's what's preventing us from being the person we want to be. It's not the flesh itself that holds us back. It's our souls. That's why churches exist, of course, and monasteries, and thank you very much, preachers, but also ashrams and retreat centers and seminars and self-help books and all that other stuff. The world we inhabit tells us we should live for material abundance, but we know that isn't the whole story. We hear our parents tell children that we should grow up to have good careers, be doctors and lawyers, or to marry someone with good prospects. Our work tells us to do this and that, and you'll get a raise and a promotion. Friends and neighbors influence what we wear and buy and do. Politicians never cease telling us how to think and certainly how to vote. We're surrounded by a riptide of demand to do this, be this, become that, to acquire these things. And the trouble is, even churches, monasteries, and retreats, and seminars, and clergy are not safe from it. Neither Merton in his monastery nor I on my pilgrim journeys ever really escape the mental and emotional rubbish. In the past, I've quoted William Wordsworth. I bring him back to mind when he said, "The world is too much with us, late and soon, getting and spending." But how can it be otherwise? Cheryl Strayed walked the Pacific Crest Trail by herself, now a major motion picture available on Netflix. Robert Redford got the message. Now he's finished filming Bill Bryson's Walk in the Woods, so an old white geezer can do what a young white woman did and make the same amount of money, presumably by making a movie about the Appalachian Trail, so people will be enriched by the pilgrim life of Bill Bryson. Even hermits apparently have Twitter feeds. The problem is not between spirit and flesh, but how can we be both well, which is to be fully alive. To live the spiritual life is not to be above the flesh or beyond the world, but to be ever cleaning out the basements and attics of both body and soul. And helping you do that is what this church and what religion and what this preacher should do. This hour is, for many of you, the one time when you can bring body and soul together in one place. Yesterday, our friends at Embody GR, our yoga community, were here in the morning practicing their rituals of postures and asanas and also becoming a community. That's how they keep body and soul together. You heard Nessa McCasey is the volunteer video, but she and others, poets who gather here, befrienders who go and visit others. In theory, every committee and group here is helping people keep body and soul together. That's the spiritual life, body and soul together. That's what makes us a church and not a business. We don't measure the dollars, we measure the bodies and souls that get kept together. But religion, of course, is not the only way we do this. For me, I have to take those long journeys to foreign countries to put it all back together again. Living on what I can carry, forced to focus on the immediate and the actual and not the distant and the possible. That's how I get body and soul back together. But you have your way of doing it too. If you do it in church, you might do it at the cottage by the lake every weekend, at least as many as you can. Some of you practice yoga or some other form of exercise or physical thing, or the choir singing. Isn't that the way you put body and soul together? Or you make art, or to quote Norman MacLean, for some it is a 4-count rhythm and the hope that a fish will rise. We all hear it, we all answer it in some way. What we really want is to do it more often, to be more in that place in our lives. Not more singing, but more body and soul together. Not more fly fishing, but more body and soul together. We want to be more alive. And we don't want to wait for a grim opportunity to remind us of that. You don't need your preacher to remind you to be alive, nor do we want to be like Samuel Johnson observed, to be like that man who knows when he's going to be hanged in a fortnight that it concentrates his mind wonderfully. We shouldn't need to be in the precipice of life or death to be aware of how alive we need to be. How can we concentrate on what matters? The Chinese-American writer Lin Yutang put it this way: the wisdom of life consists in the elimination of non-essentials. Well, you're right, but which ones are they? Thankfully, George Sand observed, the truth is too simple. One must always get there by a complicated route. I am so with her. Now, this is the point in a sermon, having led you up to this precipice, where the good and popular preacher, the one people flock to hear, will have now 6 steps to live a spiritual life, and you'll get out your notebooks and your pencils. And if you don't, I will say not to worry, it will soon be available at a religious bookstore near you. I don't do that. I am not that kind of preacher. My gospel is much harder. It is the gospel of the stumbling pilgrim who reports from the paths of life, not on the great sights of the tall temples, but on the stubbed toes and the bruises, on the getting lost and the finding oneself. I know what is required to live the spiritual life. So do you. And I'm here to tell you that all of us are trying to find the courage to do it. We're just trying to get us to do it a little better next week. I think, like St. Augustine, we all pray his prayer, give me chastity, but not yet. Give me spirituality, but not yet. Give me the simple life, but not quite. The cost of that life, we know, is too real. We're not ready to give it up, are we? We know we have too much stuff, but we love our stuff. We want to live a more spiritual life, but we don't want to do without the fun things. The payoff is too remote. The cost is too proximate. Besides, my stuff needs me. The house and the car and the retirement funds. The church needs me to go to meetings, to make plans, to be leaderly, to think of sermons. And my unmet dreams are still too much with me. In other words, your preacher standing on high is just like you and everyone else, trying every day to make it a little further down a path that he has not yet figured out where exactly it leads or how it goes, but knowing he has to go anyway. If I have any gift to bring to this pulpit, it is not the list of things for how to live your life or the glamour of someone who does the TED Talk without notes. It is that I will admit to all my warts in front of God and everybody. They say confession is a good thing, but it's not about confession. If we want a more meaningful and spiritual life, we have to start by saying, I want it, but not enough. Start with the desire that is still smaller than the anxiety, with the reality that it's hard to swim against the rip tide of life telling you to buy, own, use, lift your status by driving the right car, living in the right neighborhood. We like our creature comforts because we're creatures who like to be comfortable, and we also like the status they confer. We do. Like Augustine, we want spiritual abundance, but we also want material abundance. We want serenity, but we also want status. On all my pilgrim journeys, I find myself wandering in cemeteries. I've wandered in graveyards in Rome and Venice and Florence, Salzburg and Vienna, Paris, Geneva, London, New York, Boston, and Grand Rapids. It's something of a professional interest, you might think, but no. It's mostly a way of finding perspective. It's that whole dust unto dust thing. Doesn't matter how many BMWs you drive, eventually you can't drive any of them. 3 weeks ago, I was in China, and I went to the grave of Hongfuji, Confucius to you and me, in the city of Chufu in China. It is a family cemetery he's buried in. He was the first one there, considered the founder, and most of his descendants have been buried there with him. Now, he was buried in the 5th century BCE, before Alexander lived, before Plato lived. He has a lot of descendants, 100,000 or more, so it's a big family cemetery. But even his grave, which is select and has a path to it, is just a mound of dirt grown over with grass with a slab in the front of it with a simple engraving. And standing there, I found it to be far more powerful than the splendid marble tombs of popes that chock-a-block fill the beauty of St. Peter's. It was a lot less than theirs. but a lot more meaningful to me. Less really is more. In death, that is certainly true. We surrender it all, and what we have left is what we have bestowed to the world, not what we took into the grave with us. Less really is more. I just wish we could believe it. I conducted a wedding yesterday. Earlier this week, I said grace for the Economic Club annual dinner, two very different moments, and yet in both of them, I mentioned the monastic call, not by that name, but that stuff that we know we should do. What is essential? What we want to be if we could let go of the things we're holding on to so we could grab the thing we really want. For me, it comes from the Hebrew prophet Amos. It's very simple, just not very easy. You have been told, O mortal one, what is good, what is required of you. You have been told. Do justice, love mercy, walk humbly with your God. That's it. That's the whole show. That's every sermon. It's every prayer. It's every Sunday. It's every day. And we do it every week because every week in our hearts we pray that someday we can do it. Maybe one day we will pray it and mean it. Mean it now, not later. Help me to mean that. Amen and amen.